All right, I'm going to give it just a second because sometimes it likes to wait a minute before it actually lets us go live. Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. This is Tori. I am super excited to have with me today Christopher and Élan, who are the authors of Seasons of Albadone, and I'm so excited. And I just said it wrong after we had that whole discussion. Albadone. Oh my gosh, now I'm second guessing myself. I am so sorry. We literally just had a conversation about this. Seasons of Albadone, which I read in January and loved. I'm so excited to chat with you guys about this. So if you guys want to just briefly introduce yourselves and your books, plural now, that would be awesome.
Yeah, thank you for having us. First of all, this is
Absolutely.
it's always awesome to jump on an interview and talk books and writing. But as you said, I'm Christopher Warman, and
and I'm Élan Marché, and we're the authors of Seasons of Albadone, and also our new book that just came out the beginning of this month was A Contract in Sulphorn.
So is that one in this? It's in the same world.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say it's a sequel, but you can read it as a standalone. So it's kind of it's definitely part of the same series. I think it's a lot more fun to read them back to back because there are a lot of Easter eggs in our new one that you won't get if you haven't read the first.
Okay.
But they can be read as standalones. But recommended to read together. But
yeah. Well, I was that kind of fits the brand from what I have read in the first one, because for people who don't know or haven't read it yet, it's separated into 4 parts, and each one is kind of would you consider it like a short story-ish?
Yeah.
And they all kind of loosely tie together in the same area, but each one has a different protagonist, which I really enjoyed, actually. That's something, like, we get multi-POVs all the time in fantasy, but this one felt really unique, which was cool. So I'm curious, starting there, what was kind of the initial spark for this book, and how did you decide to write it in the format that you did? What was the process like for this one?
Yeah, so this book actually started originally as a screenplay that Chris had written for just the second story, which is about like a father who's looking for a way to save his daughter who has an illness. Right, yeah, that was the first thing he had written as just a script. And then at the time I was actually in film school myself, and I was coming up on my capstone project, and we had to make a full short film. And so I decided I loved his script and I wanted to adapt that. And we made it pretty far into doing that before we launched an unsuccessful Kickstarter to try to get the rest of it made. And then we moved to Los Angeles and just kind of never picked back up the project. And now I hope Greg Malott, if you're out there, I'm really sorry. I never turned in my capstone project. Don't find me.
Well, I mean, but you guys came up with a pretty awesome alternative, I feel like.
Something good came out of it.
Something did come out of it. Eventually we were able to bring it to fruition as a book. And honestly, I'm happier with it. I think it works really well as part of the 4 stories together. I think make up a bigger whole than just it by itself.
Yeah, it was originally called the Tree of Folktale, and we filmed most of it. Actually, it's still on a hard drive. It lives there, but the parts that we didn't get to film were what happened is we couldn't find a cabin that was convincing enough, to look like a house that character would be living in. And
we couldn't afford.
We couldn't afford to build one. We couldn't afford the ones that actually did look well. The Kickstarter,
I was going to say, you could just come up and visit me in Minnesota. There's cabins everywhere.
we send out so many messages and emails. I know your family has a cabin. Can we use it? And nothing. Yeah. It didn't go anywhere. We even went to Austin because we found something kind of like that. And we did auditions for the 2 roles of Ellie and Mir. We wanted to do it there and then bring because we lived in Oklahoma at the time.
Sure.
So we shot it mostly in Oklahoma with the Hondo character. And then we wanted to go to Austin and have the other characters there, but it didn't go anywhere. But eventually what happened is I started writing the first story, the autumn story with the Enchantress, just as a short story. I was like, I was kind of into like Grimm fairy tales a little bit. Yeah, so it was like, let me just write this thing about this enchantress with, a kind of a Red Riding Hood nod where, there's like a wolf, but the wolf is into the,
it's very kind of into the woods kind of
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then once I finished it, then I thought back on the tree and I was just like, wouldn't it be fun if like those two stories weaved together in some way? And so I rewrote the tree to include elements from the first story, like the runestone of guidance, these extra elements. And then the rest of the stories came from there. And then I showed Élan a very rudimentary version of it, and Élan said, "Okay, it's good, but," and then she kind of took it and she combed through it and completely turned it on its head, and it became what it is today. Like,
yeah, we like refined it.
She really did a lot, honestly.
Dream team, yeah. I love that. Because that's the other thing is there's so many things about this book that I felt like when I finished it and I put it down, I started thinking about. There were so many pieces of it that I felt like I hadn't really seen in fantasy for a long time. And I really loved that. And not the least of which, the fact that it's written by a husband and wife team, which is, first of all, very cool. But you mentioned like the Grimm fairy tale aspect. That was just radiating off the pages. And I absolutely loved it. Andrew said the same thing. We were kind of chatting about it a little bit. And I think you mentioned, because you guys were on, your first interview was with Steve Talks Books. And I watched, Steve. Right? We love Steve. Steve is awesome. I was really enjoying watching some of the interview yesterday because you guys talked a little bit about that Grimm fairy tales and how we have such a wide spectrum of what fantasy can look like. And I feel like a lot of people think of fantasy and they think of, the really big, massive, epic, chunky fantasy books, which we all know and love. But like this packs such a punch in such a short space of time. And I remember reading the first one thinking, okay, this looks really good. I'm excited to get into it. And I got to the end of the first story and I put the book down for a minute and I was like, okay, all right, I'm here for this. Like, and the second story, the one that you guys were just talking about, is actually my favorite of the four. It's so, and especially as a parent myself, like it was just all the feels. I bawled, and I don't cry in books very often. That one made me cry. So good job.
Thank you.
So yeah, I mean, I kind of want to dive into the fairy tale aspect of that a little bit, and you guys maybe kind of why is it that you think this kind of fantasy is important in our community and in the larger scope of fantasy?
Do you want to take this?
I'll start.
I realized that was a new one that I threw at you. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. I think when you're talking about like really classic fairy tales, you're often talking about, stories that kind of had some sort of lesson or thing that they're trying to communicate. And I think we really wanted to approach the stories from that angle, but also incorporate kind of a more modern, they're less certain about the moral conclusions that they arrive at.
Yeah.
And, then like the Grimm fairy tales where it's like, don't break into strangers' homes and, all that kind of stuff. But like, with our stories, we're definitely sending messages. We're talking about really big themes and our characters come to conclusions. But you can kind of see that sometimes those conclusions, you may not agree with them.
Right.
So yeah, I think those stories are really important to tell. I think fantasy is such a beautiful vehicle to explore really complicated moral problems that we have in our world because it allows us a distance from them. And so we can have kind of a more objective perspective because we don't feel as personally involved, I guess.
Right.
From the other end, that spectrum too. What's interesting about what we did compared to something like the Grimm fairy tales is those are all told from an omniscient point of view, where the narrator is already aware of what the moral is going to be by the end, whereas we went into our characters' heads. So the characters are not, they don't know what's going to happen to them, and so the conclusions are a little bit more gray.
Yes.
And one of the big themes that really kind of drives pretty much every story is about a cost, and how everything, the magic in this world is very cost heavy. It's not, it's not the hardest of magic systems, but it relies a lot on this, cause and effect sort of thing. And everything has a cost, from, Adriel wants to be an enchantress. That has a big cost at the end of her story. Handel wants to save his daughter, huge cost there at the end. Braid wants to usher a new era of progress, and, big costs. So that's kind of the driving force. And I think that's the biggest similarity between our book and, something like Grimm fairy tales is, everything has a consequence, and a lot of times they can be, earth shattering or character shattering.
Sometimes literally.
Another thing that I think is in the same vein as those kind of fairy tale stories is we wanted to base the characters in sort of like an everyday kind of person that's existing within a very fantastical world. So, we want to invite the people who are reading the stories to really see a lot of themselves in the characters. So I think we kind of on purpose avoided any of the tropes of like the chosen one and, having it be like the one person who's super special. And it's just like, no, these are very average people that are having very human lives. They just happen to be in a magical kind of forest.
Yeah. Well, and
nobody is the most, sorry, I was going to say nobody is the most important person in the world.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But they are the most important person to their story.
Yes.
And
right.
That's very human, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and having that kind of everyman aspect to it, I think kind of adds to the immersion because, from my perspective, when you have the older kind of Grimm's fairy tales, there is still that kind of glass wall in between us and whatever's going on in the story. Whereas in this, you get that feel of that Grimm fairy tale, and the Grimm with an underline. But you're in it. It's so much more immersive. And I think that from my perspective as a reader, that everyman quality really added to that. So I really appreciated that aspect and the choice you made with how the characters were portrayed.
It's good to hear.
Yeah. And also, I mean, we from the get-go, we kind of had a bigger story that we wanted to tell. And Seasons of Albadone being so short was both an exercise in self-publishing, because it's easier to self-publish a book that's, what is it, 56,000 words? It's really not that long at all. But it's also, it was an exercise in building a world from the little people. Like the way that I described it with Steve in kind of gaming terms is these are the NPCs in their world. They're not the main characters. They're people in the background, but their story really shapes the world a lot. And, moving forward, it causes like a ripple effect that gets, the ripples get bigger and bigger. So the story gets bigger and the world gets bigger. So,
sure.
But it had to start with a small book.
Yeah. And I actually love it, because one of the things that I've started appreciating so much is no matter how much space you have in the book that you're writing, like whether it's 427,000 words, like Ryan Cahill's latest book, or Seasons of Albadone, like it's just, I really appreciate with having that emotional impact, regardless of how long the book is, using the space that you have to the absolute maximum. And this, like, there wasn't a page of this book that I felt like wasn't used towards the immersion of the story and the characters. And so the space that you had, you utilized very, very well.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I almost wish, my only regret, I feel like, is not having an epilogue, but that's it is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just wrote another book.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So you mentioned this is the world is expanding, that we have book 2. How big is this going to get? What do you guys see for, like, is this going to be a 10-book series of all sorts of different parts of the world, or you kind of have any goals with that?
So we have 5 books in mind.
Okay.
So the first 2 that we've written, they kind of are standalones. They're introductory to the world. And then the next 3 are almost going to be like a really tight trilogy story. Like you'd have to read them as a group.
Sure.
So that's
like a trilogy,
and then
the
it's
series.
Going to be contained, and we might explore other stories within the world that we've constructed.
Yeah.
So one reason to pick up our second book is it has a great nice like little world map that's in both of our books now, actually. But if you pick that up, if you like maps, it also has a city map too. I love
the
maps.
city map is awesome.
I don't think I've ever heard a fantasy fan complain about having a map.
Right. We love them. So yeah, get the book. It has maps. But yeah, we've thought about, maybe we'll revisit the world at some point and tell, little standalone stories in other spots. But as far as the main arc of the 8th Chant series, it's going to be 5 books.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice.
And one of the things that was, obviously Seasons of Albadone, it's very small, very low key, takes place in a very small contained area with very not important to the world characters that, something happens at the end that is very important and ripples out for the rest of the series. Whereas book 2, one of the main focuses of it, beyond telling a very good story, which I think it's great, but it was very important to us to really sort of dive into and explain our magic system.
Yeah.
Because as we were writing it, Élan kept breaking the magic system. She's like, wait, but this. And I was like, wait, what do you mean? And it started getting a little, okay, we got to actually write this down on pen and paper. And so book 2, in a way, kind of dives a little bit deeper into the magic and explains, because the magic is very important to the
rest of what's going to happen.
Yeah. So having a foundation of magic in book 2 is very important for the next 3, even though the next 3 might not, dive into the magic so deeply, but having that book 2 knowledge is important for it. So, and same thing with Seasons of Albadone, having that pre-established world state knowledge is very important for what's to come.
So with you saying that, now I have to ask, from a writing process side of things, it sounds like there's some definite intuition discovery writing going on, where you guys are kind of am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah, I think like with the larger story beats and stuff, we tend to kind of nail those down together. And then I think it's just sometimes like the minutia of how certain things like technically play out, that can get a little complicated. And so we did have some moments in this last book where we, wrote ourselves into a corner and had to figure our way out again, which is always, I think, actually kind of fun.
It's kind of fun.
Yeah.
I mean,
and sometimes really interesting things come out of it that you are not expecting and that are better than it would have been if you just went with like, let's just make it easy. Let's not think too hard about it. So
yeah, a lot of times as an author, you can kind of get bogged down with, oh, this character needs to do, this and this, and then they need to get to C. And then once you get there, you're like, wait, but I forgot about the B part. I went from A to C without going through B. And she's very good at pointing out that middle part and going, wait a minute, but we said this before. Why is this character doing this? And I'm like, well, you ruined it. So a lot of times you kind of do have to kill those darlings of, okay, maybe this scene doesn't actually need to be there, or we had to rearrange these, or just cut it entirely and write a whole new scene. And maybe this character doesn't do this in the end. And that happened in book 2 is, the ending isn't exactly what I envisioned or what we envisioned when we set off to write it, but we got there, and
what it needed to be.
It needed to be that.
Yeah. So one of the things I love, I'm also married to a writer, which is just awesome. what is it like to have that? Because I feel like that's something that's such a gift to be able to have, you know, your spouse is also somebody who's a creative and you can bounce those ideas back and forth. Do you guys find that it's easier to write as a pair than it is to write on your own?
For me, definitely
Yeah,
yes.
kind of.
He's so like I've always admired and just been amazed by his ability to like just get through a blank page, which to me is incredibly intimidating, and
Yep.
it, you know, it shuts me down, and it doesn't for him. And so like that's we sort of have a very clear process where we have very designated roles, and one of his things is he writes the vomit draft. So we'll discuss like story beats, we'll discuss, you know, what's going to happen in general and stuff, but as far as like the first initial, you know, draft that comes to me, he writes that, and then I take it and go to town and just like pull it apart, put stuff in.
She's the theme queen. Whenever right before we started, like I wrote, I think 5 or 6 chapters, or you know, a vomit draft of book 2, and she started reading it a little bit, and then she's like, okay, but what is the story about? Like, what is it about? And I'm like, I don't. It's about this and this and this. And she's like, no, that's the
story.
Plot.
I don't know.
Well, she's like, that's the plot, but what is the story about? And I'm like, oh, okay, fine. So she's very good at that. She's very good at like actually like getting you to think about themes and I'm kind of very plot driven, and she's very theme driven. And I think together we make one very good author.
Yeah.
Well, it's very cohesive. So whatever you guys are doing, it's working beautifully.
Thank you. But I mean, we've collaborated in the past on so many things. We've done short films. We've done music.
Yeah, we actually just love, you know, being creative together. And I think we've worked out a good shorthand through the different mediums that we've done of like, you know, how to work with each other without getting in each other's way. And then the other thing that I'll say is I think we noticed writing the second book, we each have a voice that we write in, and then there's the voice of Seasons of Albadone and of A Contract in Sulfuran, and it's separate. It's part of both of us, but it's a separate thing. And we were really trying to figure out what that would sound like in Seasons of Albadone. And now with A Contract in Sulfuran, we both multiple times said to each other during the writing process that it just felt more natural and easy to fall
Way
into.
Easier.
Yeah.
And I think that'll continue as we keep going. Like the fusion author voice that we write in, we're getting a better sense of.
Like even in the third book, I'm currently vomit drafting it. It's going pretty well, but I'll catch myself sometimes writing a sentence and I'm like, oh, that is such an Élan thing. So I think it's getting even easier and easier, you know, throughout the process to, you know, write in that sort of consolidated voice that we both have together, that third voice. I think we found it a lot with the second book, more so than Seasons. And I find myself writing in that very often.
Yeah.
And
sometimes the opposite will happen. I'll like we'll go through something and I'll read through it and I'm like, oh, that was me. That's definitely that's me. Let's pare that down. Let's fix that.
Yeah, she's a little more flowery prose than I am, so we kind of had to find a happy medium of
boy.
Yeah, I'm a very direct prose guy, and she's very flowery, so we had to find the happy medium. But every now and then, you know, in book 2. We'll go through it because as part of our process, you know, I do vomit draft. She does like the second pulling apart and restructuring and rewriting. And then the third pass we do together. We'll read it out loud and we do it like a spot cleanup. And every now and then I'll come across the sentence and I'm like, okay, this is too much. This is a lot. This is
too much.
This is very flowery. Why is this character talking like this?
No, if the character suddenly sounds like they're like in a formal debate, like I know that's
me. That's a moment where Élan is coming through with the flowery prose. Yes. So because that's such a unique situation, one of the things that I definitely wanted to make sure we put in here was I've heard, like, there are other people who co-author books, and I feel like that is such a difficult kind of symbiosis to get to, where you have both of the writers equally in the book and the voices, and finding that process. So what advice do you guys have for people who might be thinking about co-authoring or co-authoring a book together? Like, how would you encourage or give them advice on that process?
I would say, having definite rules is very important. Like I know even other authors, like famously James Corey, who wrote The Expanse, is two guys who they split character POVs, and then at the end they edit together with their editors.
I did
I
not know
think,
that.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Each one, I think they have like a handful of characters that they write
Sure.
separately. But for us, it's very different than that. Having maybe we outline and we come up with the themes and the story together. I do the vomit draft, she does the second pass. Having those clear defined rules is very important, because I don't know, it could cause confusion, or
I think it's harder to find a fusion of your voices if you're each writing separately and then trying to bring it together. And because we're, essentially once he writes it, we're working off of one draft.
Right.
And so there's nothing where we're like trying to,
Merge
bring
things.
other things. Yeah. Like
Sure.
I think that helps a lot. And then,
yeah, I think
Yeah.
one of the coolest comments we got was when we sent Seasons of Albadone out to beta readers. One of them said, "Wow, I couldn't even tell who was writing what."
Yeah.
And I was just like, "Oh, awesome,
Great.
perfect,"
Yeah.
because that's exactly what we were going for.
So we both wrote
Because we
all of
both
it.
wrote
Yeah.
all of it. Yeah, exactly. Like ultimately, with the way that we write, having that 3-pass system, it kind of does create like a cohesive single voice.
Mhm.
And I think that's a very important thing. Is sometimes you do have to kill some things that you like because the other person doesn't like it, or because it's too much of you and not enough of both of you.
That's a great segue. Actually, I was just about to say my number one piece of advice, I think, would be if you want to co-author something with somebody else, reframe how you think about conflict. Conflicts are opportunities. And if you both feel very strongly about something staying or going or changing, or you figure out what it is about that thing that you are really excited about, and find out if there's a totally third way to do both of the things that you guys are excited about, or ask yourself which one is more important to the message you're trying to send with the book. But just some of the best things that I think happened with our books, both times we were writing, happened in that third synthesis phase, when we would just kind of get stuck on stuff for a little bit and be like, we just would never settle on it being good enough.
Right.
So sometimes you'll be like, it's not singing to us, but it's okay.
Yeah.
And we would just wrestle with that until eventually it was good enough. And I think that's important.
Sometimes we would go to the grocery store, pick up groceries, and then we'll be talking about it. You know what, like blah blah blah, and we'll still keep debating over like a scene or something. And I think being married, I think, makes it a little bit easier, because that's just kind of that's just life. You're constantly compromising, and you're working through everything. It's a healthy part of a relationship, and that's the one thing to really think about if you're trying to co-author with someone. You're in a relationship with that person,
right?
And it's a very sometimes a very heavy relationship, because you're creating a world, and there's things that you love that they might not love. So you have to have that ability to compromise, that ability to debate, and sometimes the ability to stand your ground and say, you know what, no, this is where I put my foot down. I love this, and be able to know how to defend that, and why, because that's also going to make that thing better. Because the moment you work through it and defend it, then the other person can see your way and go, oh, you know what, I get it. Maybe this is how we can make that better, so that I understand what you're going for, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of push and pull, but ultimately be ready for that. Be ready for that conflict.
Well, and I think that's a really important kind of way of looking at it, mindset, I think, for writers, period. Like, whether you're co-authoring, because even those of us who write on our own, we have alpha readers, we have editors, and you're going to have some of that, I mean, when I published my YA book, I sent it to my editor, and she did, went through it with a fine-tooth comb, and she was like, this doesn't make sense, this, and this. And like, you kind of have to have that moment where you are just mad about it for a second. You're like, no, it's fine the way it is. And then kind of like let yourself process, come back to it, recognize that they're trying to make this the best version of itself, and yeah, like finding those moments, like picking your battles carefully, like this one thing or these couple of things are my like kind of non-negotiables, but how do we fix it in the right way, or how do we include it the right way? So yeah, I think that's really good just writing advice.
Yeah.
Because it's hard as a writer to get past that hurdle of that kind of, we get a little butt hurt whenever, like, it's hard to kill your darlings and to let go of it's perfect on the first try.
Yeah, 100%. It's perfect. No, I mean, I would say, as a co-author, if you don't like that relationship you have as a single author with an editor, with beta readers, maybe rethink co-authoring, because that's what it is the whole step of the way. You constantly have a beta reader, you constantly have an editor that you're working through. It's like imagine writing something with both your beta readers and your editors with you. That's what that is. That's the process.
Reading over your shoulder.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And then having to explain to them, no, this is good. Like, I promise you, it's going somewhere.
I just have some suggestions. Yeah.
Right.
Andrew, my friend Andrew Meredith, so often when I'm most mad at a suggestion, it's because I know it's because they're right. Yep. Yeah. And that,
I think I can't remember exactly what it was, and maybe it might be spoiler, but I remember the beta readers saying something, and I went to a lot and I was like, they said this and we have to rewrite this whole section, and they were right, and I hate it, and I'm so mad. And they're like, all right, let's get it done, let's do it. Yeah, but you gotta sulk for a bit.
Oh yeah, you got to give yourself a little bit of time to process, because writing, I mean, we talk about this on my channel so often with multiple different interviews I've done, where writing is a very vulnerable craft, and you're putting out your heart and soul into this little book baby, and then you give it to people and ask them to shred it. Like, that's a very vulnerable process. So giving yourself that moment to sulk is totally normal and okay, I think.
Yeah, and I would say more so than any other art form, because I mean, we've done music, we've done a film, and I feel like something about a book, putting it out there, is you're kind of expecting a lot of your readers. You're expecting them to really dive into the book and understand themes and understand characters and have that time commitment. Whereas, a film, we've done 20 minutes, I've done a feature, like, that kind of stuff. And it's like an hour commitment at most, music, it's like a 2-3 minute commitment to a song, but a book, that's a big deal. You're really pushing it, and it better be good, but it's tough. It's a tough art form.
And there's something so like just immediate and intimate about the written word and how it can capture the inner workings of your mind, that you really do feel, in a lot of ways, like you're putting so much of yourself into what you're making, and you want, people to resonate with that in the right ways. So
yeah, especially some of the characters in Seasons, like writing Handel was such a struggle, because like he's an unreliable narrator, he's an alcoholic, and you put bits and pieces of yourself into these characters. It might not be 100% us, but it's also 100% us. So it's a very vulnerable place to be sometimes.
Yeah, and you get to share parts of yourself that are not flattering, or tap into parts of yourself almost like you're. When you're writing characters, I almost think of it as like you're acting in a way. Yeah. And so you tap into these parts of yourself that, are darker, that you wouldn't necessarily bring to light otherwise. And so
not the like Thanksgiving dinner conversation necessarily, but you'll put it in a book.
Yeah, no, one of the most annoying, fun yet annoying characters to write was Doravan in book 2, which if anyone has read it in the chat, or if anyone, if you've read any reviews, unanimously, everyone is like, I hate this guy. I hate him. I don't want to read him ever again. And I'm like, well, there's a lot of me in him. like that is, there's a lot of me at 16, at 15, at 14 in there. And, you're most teenagers are annoying. Teenagers kind of suck, and Doravan sucks
Being a
because of that.
teenager,
And
yeah.
So yeah, it's very humbling
Mm-hmm.
to read those reviews, because it's just like, yeah, we succeeded.
All of that cringe is true.
We
Yeah,
succeeded, but it's like, yeah, it's me cringing at myself.
Mhm.
So you captured it a little too perfectly.
Yeah. No, he's meant to be a little.
He is, yeah. Like he's perfect as he is, and the thing is, too, you develop like a soft spot for them.
Yeah, I love him.
Too. Like, yeah, I love him.
I love him.
He's a piece of shit sometimes, but I love him.
I can think of quite a few characters like that just off the top of my head that I'm like, you get to a certain point in the book and you're like, how did you make me care so much about this character right now?
That's definitely, that's the goal with him for our second book.
Yeah. So like, you kind of going back to what you were saying about, writing or reading being that very intimate experience. I feel like, for me at least, one of the differences between film, music, and all of that kind of stuff, or visual arts versus reading, is it's so much more like we all go to the theater and we watch a film and there's like 50 people in the theater and we are all experiencing to some degree the same thing. Mm-hmm. When you go into a book, I mean, we're all bringing our own experiences and stuff, but there's at least an element of it with the visual aspect that is universal. When we go into a book, I mean, how many times have we talked to people about our favorite books and be like, oh, you thought he looked like that? No, he doesn't. He looks like this.
Yeah.
Or I totally hated this character. And somebody else is like, oh, I love that character. Like, it's so individual to, and I think that might be part of, it's not just vulnerable for us as the writers, but it's also vulnerable for us as readers, because you've kind of entered into that collaboration now where you're part of the vulnerability when you're reading along.
That's a great point.
Yeah, and there's a sort of element of, I mean, I'm petty. I read every single review, but I don't. If I do interact, it's at a very minimum. But there's an element of hands off as an author that I feel like needs to be a little bit more universal. Of sometimes, like, once you publish a book, it's no longer yours to dictate how it's being experienced. It's the reader's responsibility then. And it's no longer yours. Yeah, like you've given it up.
Yeah.
I think there's that's one of the most beautiful things to me about any sort of art is the fact that we do all experience things subjectively, and we are bringing something that is so unique to us anytime we're experiencing art. And so everybody's going to have a different reaction. Everyone's going to remember different parts as their favorite. And I think that's really beautiful. I think that's really fun. And I hope nobody ever tries to shut that down for themselves because they're too worried about what we as the authors intended.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's, I mean, obviously there are themes that we explore in each of our books but there's no objective, truth to any of it. It's take what you want, take what you get. Right. Or not what you want. Take what you get out of it. Yeah. Sometimes you get something that you might not want, and that's that. Yeah.
And I think I'm trying to remember the phrase. There was a quote I heard once that art exists to comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. Disturb the comfortable. And I think it's more than that, but I think that's such a great way of looking at it, that there's so many different pieces to, I might really kind of be uncomfortable about one part or one character because it's, asking me to look at something that is hard to look at or whatever. I mean, and that's, again, going back to that vulnerability conversation. It's vulnerable for the readers too. And I think we've been kind of having a discussion around Twitter and some of my Discord groups about the roles of readers, reviewers, and authors, and how we as reviewers and readers, like, that respect kind of goes both ways, and how to meet, like, what that looks like. And there's a difference between me coming in and saying, I really this book didn't really jive with me for these reasons and that kind of thing, which is subjectively my right to say, versus calling out, like going after the authors. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right.
Like there's also that kind of, and I think that's a discussion that just needs to continue to happen in the
Of course.
community as a whole on both sides, because it's kind of like co-authoring. You're in a situation where the readers and writers are all collaborating with each other, and it gets messy sometimes.
Mhm.
So yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that's a really important conversation to keep having
Right.
with everybody.
Well, yeah, and you know, as both authors and readers and experiencers of art in general, it's
Yeah.
you know, you kind of inhabit both of those spaces a lot of
Mhm.
times, and like sometimes you know, I'm on Goodreads, for example, and sometimes it's hard for me to you know really like I actually don't review books on Goodreads. I'll give it like a star rating after I read it, like my first initial impact, just because it's like I'm a cataloger. I like to catalog
Yeah.
things
Yep.
just for my own record. But you know, I feel bad from an author standpoint because you know I'm not a reviewer. But you know, but then again, like you can't fault someone for having a negative opinion of something.
Mhm.
Mhm.
But yeah, you don't come after the artist.
Right.
That's not what
Right.
you're supposed to. You know,
Right.
it wasn't intended to be bad. I promise you.
Right.
Nobody intends to make bad art. Like, you know, even the
Yeah.
worst thing you can imagine, someone intended that to be good for what it is.
Well, and I also just never assume people are, necessarily going to agree with my opinion. So I'll tell somebody, I can only say if I liked it or not. I can't say if
Right.
you're going to like it or not. I think there are people that'll just be like, oh, I hated this book. It's a bad book. It's like, that's not true. It's a bad book for you.
Objectively.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and admittedly, I have some questionable taste sometimes.
Don't we
But,
all?
if I really like something, I can only tell somebody like, that doesn't mean much.
I loved it.
I loved it.
I don't know about you, but you know, maybe give it a
I
try.
also watch Halle Berry's Catwoman anytime I'm sick. So take it with a grain of salt.
Hey, we all have those, I
She really
guarantee
does.
you.
I really do
She
every
really does.
single time I'm sick.
That's fair. It's like a comfort food. Like,
It is.
Yeah.
It's
yeah,
great.
I have those.
Yeah, people have comfort books and whatever.
Oh
you know.
yeah. So that's a perfect segue, because I was just going to ask you guys about inspiration, influence, favorite things on your website. It says, please ask us about our favorite things, or something to that. No, I am here to ask you about all of your favorite
right.
things. So, and we kind of mentioned this before we went live. I think sometimes we limit when we're interviewing authors to say, oh, what books or authors were you influenced by, which is awesome. But what are you guys influenced by? What are your inspirational storytelling things that you just fall back on and love, besides Halle Berry's Catwoman, which we've now discovered is in there somewhere?
I mean, I kind of inhabit a weird space where I have a very kind of ish case of aphantasia. I can't, like, whenever I read something, I can't fully picture picture it. Like, for example, like I read A Song of Ice and Fire
Sure.
after watching the show, and for me that was a lot easier because I
Sure.
could picture the actors in those
Yeah.
roles. But if I don't have a frame of reference, a lot of times I'll look up fan art just so I
Sure.
know what this character is supposed to look like, because it's really hard for me to picture and form something in my head with that, with character descriptions in books. So for me, I'm a very visual person, so I love film, and I mean we both love film. So
Yeah.
we're I mean we both went to film school. We worked on that film, but whenever writing Seasons of Albadone, for example, obviously, you know, Grimm fairy tales, that sort of thing was a big influence, but also for me, you know, from a visual standpoint, I wanted to capture kind of the vibe of two of my favorite films, being Pan's Labyrinth. Is like Pan's Labyrinth is my favorite film of all time, and that was kind of
So beautiful.
it was kind of the vibe I was going for, and then also Princess Mononoke is like one of my top favorites, and
Thematically, there's a lot of that.
thematically, there's
yeah.
a lot of crossover of that sort of like, you know, humanity versus nature and progress versus nature, that sort of thing. So those are two big visual influences on Seasons, and yeah, two of my favorite films of all time. Love those.
I think in my Goodreads review, I mentioned like Grimm's fairy tale meets Miyazaki. because so I feel like without having talked to you that you apparently came across perfectly.
That's come up so many times. People
Yeah.
are like, "Oh, Miyazaki should adapt this."
Right.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
it's when I was doing I did all like the concept art and stuff
Mm.
for when we were going to shoot it as a film, and
Yeah.
I wish I still had it like to show and stuff, because it really looked a lot like certain like Miyazaki scenes and stuff, just like how it played out, even though I wasn't replicating the style, but just
Mhm.
like the general
I think I
construction of
posted it on Twitter at some point. Yeah, there was an image that she drew of, I mean, without spoilers, the transformation scene in yeah, and yeah, she drew it and showed it to me, and I was like, this is like very Miyazaki-esque. It was, yeah, she's a very good artist, by the way. She also draws.
We need to see more of that on Twitter. It sounds like.
But yeah, what are some of your influences?
So you know, same kind of influences for the books, I would say. But as far as just like favorite movies, I really love it's a Studio Ghibli film, but it's Only Yesterday, and I
Mhm.
feel like not a lot of people have seen that one. But that's a really good
So
one.
good.
I really loved Marcel the Shell with Shoes on, the movie that came out.
Yes.
One of my like top recent films that has come out. I love the film Capote, which
Heard
is
it.
about
Yeah, I've heard of
Truman
it.
Capote, and really great because it's not the same as in Cold Blood. It's very much about
Mhm.
him and his writing process. And it's a movie about an author, so of course you'd like, yeah. And then yeah, another one that I would suggest for people is and this one I think is influential to my writing style, The Diving Bell and the Butterfly.
Hmm.
It's a French foreign film, and it's based on a true story about this guy who was in a car accident, and he got locked in syndrome, which is where
Mm.
you're, you know, mentally all there, but you can't physically move. You're nearly all paralyzed. And it's based off the book that he wrote about that experience. Just through, he had control of like one eye, and he was able to like blink
Wow.
for each letter of every word, and he wrote an entire book that way. So yeah.
Wow.
Great yeah, great, you know, book to read and movie to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, because you said with the there's kind of like bits and pieces of a film for this, and you guys are musicians. So, are we going to see like not just an expansion of books in the series? Are we going to see like, is that something you guys would like to like consider
I don't
at
know.
some point?
I don't know. At this point, I'd probably be happier handing it off to someone else who
Sure.
wanted
Yeah.
to, you know, make it and just like make it their problem.
Yeah.
It's almost dramatic to revisit that.
Oh yeah. Oh, it kind of is. It's just that feeling of like unfulfillment of
Yeah.
we never got to finish this thing, and
Yeah.
it's been what, it was 2017, so it's been a little while
Yeah,
now, but
been a
it's
while.
yeah, looking back on it, you always have that little bit of regret, and I feel like putting it into book form really
Cured a little
helped.
bit of that. Yeah, it was very medicinal.
Yeah, it helped a lot, but it made some good reels for everyone that worked on it, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but yeah, I don't know if we'll revisit it in that sense. We've pondered or we've thought about doing some songs. There were some songs in book 2. And
Yeah.
we've thought about doing them for the audiobook. I don't think it's gonna happen, but that'd be kind of
I
fun.
still think it would be fun. I mean, you know, maybe not even for the audiobook, but maybe just to release as little audio files for the people who subscribe to. We have a newsletter.
Yep.
It could be kind of fun.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
We drop little things in the newsletter too. So if you guys who are watching are interested,
Down in the description box below.
perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, we
Definitely sign
do yeah, it's monthly, and we do not just, you know, talking about writing progress, and sometimes we feature other authors and all that kind of stuff, but we also kind of break down some of the lore in the books.
Yeah.
So we do some like world building, and
Cool.
we talk a lot about the magic. It's a runic magic system in the series, so we talk about each rune and what it does and all that kind of stuff. So pretty fun. But
Yeah.
I don't know if we'll do a film based on this, but
Yeah, I don't think so, but
I
I
think
love
after
the
the
music
series,
idea though.
yeah, the music
Yeah.
idea is kind of fun, but I feel like after the we're done with the series, and we have other stories that we want to tell, but we do have some screenplays that we'd like to write.
Yeah, we actually do have some screenplays. It's just not this.
Sure. It's a completely different direction.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Is it something where you guys feel like fantasy in general is kind of an area you like to stay in, or do you want to explore other genres?
I think we're gonna end up exploring other things after we have finished this series.
This was
Like
the
I've had a little screenplay on my like to-do list for years now, and it's more based on like a true story kind of thing. So very
Don't-
different than fantasy. Yeah, I'm not going to talk about like
yeah, it's a little bit
Yeah.
it's touchy, but yeah, it's very good.
Yeah.
It's a very good story, but yeah, honestly, Seasons was the first fantasy we've ever written, either of us.
Mhm.
There was actually before Seasons, I started writing like another book entirely just as practice. And that's kind of the skeleton now of book 3 of the series. So
Okay.
I'm bringing that back to help a little bit, but beyond that, I've never written fantasy before, and but we've always done screenplays in other genres, more real life, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, I think after this we might do some other things. We also
Yeah,
we've
explore.
dabbled in horror. We've
Mhm.
I mean, horror and fantasy are close cousins, but
Mm-hmm.
a little bit more like gothic horror. We
Sure.
have some stories that we'd like to explore.
Right. Yeah.
Nice. So sounds like a lot of different creative outlets there to be
Oh, yeah.
explored. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
we're always doing something. We're always working on
Yeah.
something. Obviously,
Very
this
busy.
series has been the main focus for
Hmm.
what, 3 years now. But
Yeah.
we're always working on something. Even before then,
Mhm.
we've done a lot.
Yeah. Andrew wanted to know what instruments you guys play.
I play the guitar and keyboards. I have a background in production. I do a lot of
Nice.
audio editing. Right now, I'm audio editing for and mixing for a short film, and I do a lot of that kind of stuff on the side. But
Yeah, he's the virtuoso. I for like our musical projects and stuff, I write really silly songs, guys. That's my skill and what I contribute. And I also will sing them, even though my voice is not great. But that's what I contribute.
Hey,
yeah,
Silly lyrics.
silly
we've
songs
done.
can be difficult to do well. So
She's
don't-
a very good songwriter.
I'm
I
a good
will say.
songwriter. Yeah.
Yeah, we've done all sorts of things from trap to
We do like little like folk songs and stuff. A lot of times like I'll just come up with something and then it'll turn into something where we sing it for like a week and then we're like, oh, maybe we should like record that.
like couple jam sessions.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, she did. She had this like one refrain about cows in Oregon.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you're familiar with. There's like this conspiracy theory about cows in Oregon and how a lot of times there's maybe an illness or something going through them.
They tend to show up with like they're drained of blood and they've got organs missing.
Yeah, they're deflated.
Big mystery about why it's happening.
And yeah, it's
Only in
happened since
Oregon.
the 80s. It's happened quite a few times.
Yeah.
So she wrote this like she had this little ditty that she would keep saying about the cows
Yeah,
in
and like
Oregon.
I wrote as in like I just started singing it
Yeah.
when we were in bed at like
Yeah, as you do.
10
Yeah.
at night. Yeah.
And we
right
just
before
kept
we
singing
go
it
to
to each other. We're like, okay, this has to be a song. So we made it into like a campfire song, and it's on YouTube somewhere. So
You guys just have an incredibly creative house.
oh yeah.
Which is awesome. I wanted to make sure that I didn't miss any other questions because I know there's been some chat going through. Andrew had to go to bed early, but he wanted to let you guys know that he loved your work.
Good night, Andrew.
Good night. Thank you.
Our friend Mike says hi. I don't know if he's read Seasons yet, but if he hasn't, I will see if I can give a nudge in that direction. Yeah, Andrew was talking about when we were going through the NPC kind of discussion about the characters. And I feel like kind of jumping back to that for just a second, I feel like that's maybe a little bit of a Resurgence now that people are really starting to take more interest in those types of characters, which is exciting and I think very relatable to a lot of us who are just like, oh yeah, I'm this person.
Right.
Yeah,
Like I think of the tremendous success of Legends and Lattes.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah, just something cozy, something small
Yeah.
scale. I mean, our book is, I wouldn't say cozy, but it's cozy adjacent, I guess.
Yeah.
It's a small scale, small
Yeah.
time people. And I
That
think
was-
a lot of people are kind of over a lot of the bigger tropes, things like the special kid or
Mhm.
the chosen child, that kind of stuff. I think
Mhm.
people are over it.
Yeah.
Give us some insignificant nobodies.
Right.
You
And
know?
I don't think you have to look very hard in our recent timeline to figure out why people would suddenly have kind of maybe not their fantasy escape isn't like some world ending event anymore, but it's like
Mhm.
being comfortable and cozy.
Right.
You know, I think after we went through the pandemic and stuff, that kind of the thing that used to be an exciting escape fantasy became like oh, the reality is we're out of toilet paper. And
Those were the days.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Well,
go ahead.
I was going to say, people, I think, started also valuing maybe different things. They
Yes.
started valuing community a lot
Mhm.
more. And I mean, even online communities,
Yeah.
there's been a huge boom in Resurgence post-pandemic. And
Mhm.
I think that's also something that we explored in Seasons of Albadone is, it's a smaller community of people. And,
Yep.
they have a shared history together. And as the world keeps getting bigger, the importance of community keeps getting a lot more amplified as well.
Yeah. I mean, segueing off of that, you guys have kind of, speaking of community, you guys have come into the indie author community with Seasons. How's that experience been for you guys so far?
It's been challenging. I mean,
It's been amazing for me because I feel like you do most of he's the one who's really in the community, and I just get to benefit by showing up for these fun interviews with really
Well, I'm so glad you did.
yeah, Élan is she's my ghost partner.
I'm not a social media person. I still have a Facebook and that's it. So
That's fair. That's fair.
No, but the community has been awesome. It was entering it was kind of difficult just because you're always entering with the caveat of I've written this thing, please read the
Right.
thing that I wrote.
but
So
you don't want to be the person.
you don't
just
want to be that
talking.
person, so you
Yeah.
kind of want to slowly build friendships, slowly build
Yeah.
connections, and then go, hey, by the way, I also wrote this thing. And
And thankfully he's very charming, so I think that helps a lot.
yeah, but no, the community has been awesome. There's so many amazing authors that are self-pubbed, more and more each year, honestly,
Mhm.
that come on and they'll write like some of the best literature of the year. And it's
Right.
crazy. It's crazy to me that there's even a competition because like these publishers, they're in trouble, honestly.
Yeah.
It's cheaper to self-pub and
Yeah.
you have a bigger reach a lot of times, which is weird to say, but
Yeah.
you're more in charge of the way that you want your book to be viewed and which eyes the book goes to. And it's a little more difficult because obviously you don't have the same funds that a big publishing house
Right.
has, but you also have a lot of control, and that's it's very powerful, very empowering.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm very happy with it. I love obviously our reviews have been very good, very positive. So it's easy to say I love all the reviewers and the reviewing in the booktube community. I'll hate you all the moment you give us 1 star.
Well, I know that in a couple of the Discords, we have a special 1-star cafe event that anytime an author gets their first 1-star review, there's a big like voice chat where we all get together and like, hey, kind of like make it a big deal, which is fun. That's in Keymark. AR with them does that.
Okay, yeah, I'm in there. No,
Yeah.
it's funny. For Seasons of Albadone, our first
We ripped that Band-Aid off so fast.
day one,
Day
we got a
one.
day 1 star of someone that didn't even read the book.
Hadn't even bought the book.
Like what happened is we did like this special promotion thing on Reddit r/fantasy, which that was a mess. Where we gave out the book for free for just launch day because obviously you're coming into a community we didn't know any better,
Right.
so we gave it away for free. And Someone got the book for free, and within 5 minutes gave it a 1 star with meh, didn't care for it.
Yeah. And just
I'm like,
to take us down a notch.
You didn't even read it. It was the first
Fastest
review you got.
read ever. Like,
Yeah, first
5
review we got.
minutes.
Yeah.
So it
Wow.
launched day 1 with a 1 star. So I was like calling
We've been-
friends,
yeah, we were
calling
like
beta
trying to
readers.
bring it back up ever since.
Yeah,
and
I was like, you better rate it. Could you give it like a fair rating? So we're trying to get it up there. So I think for the first week it had like 3 stars, and it was like kind of demoralizing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a terrible launch. We learned a lot.
Right. Yeah. Don't do that. There are people out there that'll just shit on you to shit on you.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really glad that you guys kept going, because this is not a 1-star book in my opinion at all. It's not a 3-star book either. That's crazy. Like some people's kids, you know?
Yeah, some people, but yeah. So if you're gonna, a little tip for self-pub authors: if you're gonna give your book up for free, make sure to maybe not announce it to the biggest fantasy community in the world. Just kind of keep it in your circles.
Yeah. Don't encourage anybody to like teach you a lesson.
Yeah.
That there are definitely like different types of communities around the fantasy industry too, and I'm like,
for sure.
I'm sorry, guys. That's rough.
Hey, you live and you learn, and we wrote a second book, and we're proud of.
Right.
We're very proud.
You guys
of
are doing amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up, because I was actually going to ask you guys, as kind of a, like, for anyone watching who's, a new indie writer who's like, all right, I've got my book baby and I'm going to send it out into the world. What advice would you give them starting out? Don't do that, obviously. Don't put
it. More from a granular technical side of it. Don't spend too much money on advertising from the get-go, because nobody knows who you are.
Right.
Spend that time instead of spending that money, spend that time networking and getting to know the communities, because that's way more valuable.
Yeah.
That has no price.
Right.
So don't spend too much money from the get-go. Get to know your readers, get to know exactly what they want and what they're used to. Make sure your book is polished and ready to go. Make sure you love your book, because being able to sell your book to potential readers is extremely important. My
advice would be try to film your book, fail at doing that, and then rework it. It really gives you a lot of time to edit.
This book has really made the full life circle here.
Yeah. If you touch it that many times and you convert it into a screenplay and then back into the thing, and then do all of that.
Well, it worked clearly.
Yeah.
So
it does.
I can get behind this advice, because it
checks out.
It works.
No, but it really, like, take your time with your first book. It gets easier. Like, the more you do it,
it's the most time you'll ever have. You don't feel the pressure that you'll feel from then on.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Because like then releasing a second book, you're just like, but what if the people who read book 1 hate it, and then we lose the whole audience for the rest of it? So far that hasn't happened, but it could, and that would be crushing. But you just kind of have to move on. So just take your time with the first book. Make it as good as it can, because you're not proving anything to anyone.
Exactly.
And then I would say from the other end of it, don't be afraid to publish it. Like, don't, once again, you're not proving anything to anyone. The fact that you're publishing something is already so brave and so huge. Like, you're putting yourself out there, and that's awesome. Like, you'll feel a sense of pride that you've never felt before. And just do it. Make sure it's good, but do it.
Yeah.
Like, don't be afraid.
Yeah. I always love the feeling of getting that first box of your first book.
Yeah.
And like, awesome. It doesn't get less exciting after that, but like, however many books you've written, like, how was that when you guys first got the first box of Seasons and saw the book for the first time?
Although in the first proof that we got, my name was misspelled.
Oh yeah. No, right on the spine. There's actually there's a video online of us opening the first package with the proof. And we were like, oh, look, it looks so cool. And we showed the camera the spine, and it was like the accent was wrong.
Yeah, it was on the H of my name, Marché.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Not sure what happened there, but yeah, we had to fix that. But no, but it was like getting the actual like printed version of both books. It just feels good to flip through it. It's like it's not in a dock somewhere. It's in my hand. Like it's real. It's the merging of so many talents, because we had cover people. We had someone come in and do the maps. Shout out Dewey, he's amazing. It's just everything is there, and it feels amazing. It's
full disclosure. After we got the book, for like a week, I take the Metro into work, and I would carry it on the Metro with me and like read through it. Just hoping somebody would ask me like, oh, what's that book that you're reading? And I was like, let me tell you.
Yep. So,
but also just because like, I felt good having it with me. It was like,
oh
yeah. Baby,
Well, you should. I mean, it's amazing. So, and with that, like, I do want to bring a little bit of attention to this cover, because it's absolutely gorgeous. And
shout out Tim.
Tim
is amazing.
So how did you guys find your cover artist? What was that process like, briefly?
I used to work at Panera Bread in college with Tim.
Okay.
And Tim is amazing. He is such a good artist, and he does a lot of Legend of Zelda fan art.
Oh, so yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, so that was kind of the vibe I was going for. I love the cover. A lot of people are thrown off by the tone of the story compared to the cover, which, whatever. The story surprises you, so should the cover.
Sure.
But yeah, no, Tim is amazing. Unfortunately, he couldn't come back for the second cover. He had some medical issues that, unfortunately, he couldn't draw it. But we found Omer, and through Zach Argyle, who,
yes,
he did this. It's the same cover artist.
Yeah.
And he did an amazing job. Obviously we wanted to have kind of a thread between the two covers,
right,
kind of a similar vibe. So
identical.
So he kind of adapted his art style a little bit to kind of give them a series cohesion.
Yeah.
We're probably going to go again with Omer for the third book. But yeah, it's Tim is a good friend. Omer obviously was a recommendation from Zach, and shout out Zach.
Yes, I think he's also having an interview right now, actually.
Oh, is he?
Yeah. Yeah. My friend Kay over at Kay's Hidden Shelf. We suddenly realized, we were like, wait, what time are you interviewing? What time are you interviewing? Oh my gosh, they're at the same time. So yeah, Zach's over there getting an interview too.
Well, good for him. Yeah, he's a great self-pub author.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I love the cover. I will say, like, I'm kind of impressed by how well you guys were able to meld that kind of, like you said, cozy adjacent with like flat out grimdark in certain areas, which really shows, I think, some of the influences you were talking about before. But like, yeah, I was very impressed by that. I was like, how is this making me feel like it's wholesome, but I'm also disturbed? That's
especially with part 3. Like, obviously spoiler free, but there's something that happens at the end of part 3 that we kind of talked about for a while. There's I don't want to spoil it, but something happens, and it's pretty brutal. And we kind of struggled with it for a bit. It was like, is this too brutal? Is this really? Is it pushing it? It's not gory, or it's not that sort of
just dark,
like horror. Yeah, it's just dark, and we're just kind of like, is this where we're going with it? And eventually, we decided this is the story we want to tell, and this is where this part ends, and it's
right. Yeah, I think what was important for us in both the books is, if we were going to have a character that was going to go through something traumatic, we wanted that to be serving some sort of purpose, for like the actual like themes of the book. We don't just want to hurt somebody for a plot device or to, move stuff along. Yeah.
We don't want to fridge anyone,
Exactly. We didn't want to tell that kind of story. We wanted everybody to feel like the consequences were fitting, or that things just, were reflective of actual reality, where stuff just does happen, that is dark, but how do people deal with that, and what hope do they find in it?
Right.
We never just wanted to beat somebody down and then like be like, yeah, that's the point. this is what life is.
Yeah. Look how dark this is.
Yeah.
And not to dig at a grimdark. I know that there's a lot of good grimdark out
yeah.
there, but that's just not our, that's not what we were going for.
Yeah.
Even in the darkest moments, it's, it was never the intention was to badger these characters. It was just, this is what kind of needs to happen.
Yeah. So more in the, I mean, and one of the things, as we know, is that what is grimdark? If you ask on Twitter, you will get 100 different answers. So it is interesting, all the different subgenres and how they've kind of, each of them exists on their own spectrum now, which is like we used to just have fantasy.
Yeah, it was adult fantasy, young adult fantasy. Yeah, that was it. And now you have so many genre things, and nobody can agree on it. You'll ask someone is A Song of Ice and Fire grimdark, and you'll get like a million different answers. It's like, no, it's not. Yes, it is. I don't know. I don't know what grimdark is. Like, does it make me feel bad? Then it's probably grimdark.
Yeah, well, I've talked to so many authors now, myself included, that are just kind of writing our books, and then we're gonna I wrote a book. It's fantasy. I'm gonna give it to you guys, and you guys can tell me what subgenre it's in.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, we always kind of described it as like a folk fantasy. That was always what we said it was, but ultimately we just kind of let people decide what it is. I think that's kind of important.
Yeah.
Same with like the book 2. Book 2 is not quite as folk and in grim fairy tale. It's more, I don't know, traditional fantasy, whatever that means.
But more like an epic fantasy.
Yeah, epic fan. I don't know. Well, we're just letting the audience decide what it is.
I figured the genre labels are there for people who are trying to categorize to figure out, what they want to read.
What Goodreads shelf to put it on.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
The Amazon KDP algorithm classified it as military fantasy, which I don't understand, but whatever.
Interesting.
All right.
I mean, we had an issue with Seasons of Albadone where we couldn't get ads approved on Amazon because it kept classifying it as erotica.
Okay. I mean, I definitely wouldn't put it in that subgenre personally.
Right. I know this is spoiler free, but I can definitely say it's not that sexy of a book.
So we had email support and figure it out. They're like, oh, it's written in the metadata. They were like, why did you write it in the metadata? And I'm like, I didn't do this. Like, what are you talking about? Why would I write erotic? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
That sounds like Amazon. This is actually your fault.
Yeah, no, they kept blaming me, and I'm like, what do you mean? Why would I classify my book as erotica? Because they don't allow ads for erotica books.
Right.
Is the thing. So I kept not allowing ads, and whatever. Ultimately, it took like almost a month of writing.
Well, for anyone who is wondering, for sure, we can clarify that Seasons is in fact not erotica.
No.
Yeah.
No, not even close.
Yeah, Lana from India Chords. Where exactly?
Yeah, no, I have no idea. That was such a fluke.
That's
hilarious. Yeah, that was very random, but also like kind of hilarious too.
Yeah, we were laughing about it for a while.
Tiago's being very helpful here.
Shout out Tiago, buy his books.
I would be more surprised if he didn't send it back because it didn't have like griffins in it. So.
Oh, but it might have griffins in it.
Oh, okay.
It might.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
I mean, there might be griffins in Seasons of Albadone if you reread it.
Okay, I will. I'm probably totally missing it, and that's on me.
It's in the prologue.
Oh, okay. I'll go back. Well, perfect. I'll just go back and read the prologue. I want to reread it, but I want to read Sulphorn first, and then go back and reread the first one because Tiago. I'm gonna let that conversation go in the chat here. Yeah, so let's see. I've been derailed by Tiago Abdallah now. I think
Sulphorn might take you a little bit longer. It's a little over double the size.
Yeah,
isn't it? Okay.
Yeah, and
like 425-ish.
No, it's 125,000 words. Oh, you mean the page page count? Yeah. I was thinking in words.
Count, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
so
like
125.
Yeah. It's over double the size, and then book 3's Book 3 is looking even bigger.
Okay, so we're having
Yeah.
kind of a, I don't know if you guys saw, but I have Rob J. Hayes' series back here, and I remember getting book 3 in the mail and being like, man, this box feels heavy. Like, whoa. All right.
Yeah, they'll look a little awkward on a shelf. Maybe they'll just keep getting
They'll just get
wider.
bigger, yeah.
But
If it's a
yeah.
good book, I don't think anybody's going to care.
No, right.
Yeah. Well, I want to say thank you guys so much for sharing your time and for coming on my channel, because I was so excited to talk about this book. It's been, I think, up till this point, one of my favorite reads of 2023. So thank you guys for writing it, first of all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I cannot wait to read Soulforn and see where the series goes next. Everybody in the chat, down in the description box below is the website and the Amazon link to the book, so that if you don't have it already, you know, you should do that. Get it. Yeah, but thank you guys so much for sharing your time. I really appreciate it.
And thank you so much for sharing your platform with us.
Thanks for
This
inviting
is-
us.
Yeah.
That's what it's here for. So yeah, if anybody else in the comments, oh, we do have, Lana has something to say. Can Élan do the audiobook for the next book?
So we do have somebody who's working on the audiobook currently. It is not me, but I think you guys are going to be really happy. It is a friend of ours.
Shout out Dina. Lots of shout outs tonight.
Yes,
Shout out Dina.
yeah, shout out to Dina. She is a professional actress, and she, I think, is going to really kill it on a level that I just could never imagine. So, yeah,
she's gonna kill it.
I think you guys are going to be very, very pleased by the audiobook.
Comes out in
It does
April.
come out. Hopefully.
Awesome.
That's the plan.
Anitha, I will never apologize for adding books to your TBR, especially not this one. This one is a really, really good book. You're going to love it. Yeah, and honestly, you guys, like, I read this, and part of the reason that I read this in less than 24 hours is because I could not put it down. So, like, once the end of that first story, I was like, I can't put this down. I have no idea what they're gonna do next. Yeah, like, what is? And it was so good. So yeah, Anitha, you should definitely add it to your TBR. And sorry, not sorry. So, but yeah, thank you guys again so much for coming on the channel, and congratulations on all of the success of your books so far. And yeah, I'm excited to see where you guys go next. So
Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
absolutely. All right, guys, we'll see you in the next video.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.